Wellness with Paul Rosen.
Our diets, our Western diets in America are just really, you just don't realize how poor they really are.
What would you say to others who would like to feel better?
Sometimes you need to find the instruction. That's where the testing and everything comes in, because without that knowledge, there's no way I could have got to the point where I'm at today.
Straight talk about health.
And then I start preaching and telling them what I've been doing. And this guy named Paul Rosen has changed my life.
With your host, Paul Rosen.
By the way, the information contained in this program is not approved by the FDA, nor intended to treat, diagnose, or claim to cure any medical condition or disease as defined by Western medicine. However, skilled practitioners of many disciplines have found nutrition response testing to be a highly reliable supportive technology for assessing the health and fitness of the body's functional system.
To our point this morning, Paul, I'm going to do something now I often do on the show. I'm going to make a point, something I've researched and thought about, and then likely I'm going to watch you shoot it down and watch it burn on the ground in flames. So, are you ready to go?
I am ready to go.
The point I'm going to make is that chronic pain is a gut issue. It's often related to our stomachs. Is that a correct or incorrect statement?
Chronic pain?
Yes.
Related to your stomach?
Yes.
Sometimes.
You're shaking your head in disbelief. Where does he come up with this stuff?
I don't know where you got that.
Okay, I came up with that one. I was thinking about the microbiome in particular.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not necessarily connected, although if you weren't taking care, if you weren't tending your microbiome carefully, just for folks out there who don't know what that is, the microbiome is all of the community of, various microscopic organisms that live in your gut, viruses and bacteria, beneficial in general, although they do tend to things that on their own, so some organisms that would be harmful, but they're tended by the good organisms, and that they live in your gut, and they're responsible for maintaining a healthy immune system as well as a healthy digestive system, and it even affects the emotional aspects of the brain. So that if you're inordinately irritable or depressed or anxious, or find yourself high and low, then it's quite possible that your microbiome is out of balance, which we can help you restore. But as far as pain goes, pain, we'll start it off. Pain is just another symptom that the body is manifesting to our displeasure. Nobody likes pain. If the source is not obvious to you, for example, you didn't trip and fall, you didn't, you weren't, hit by a motor vehicle. In other words, you just don't know where this pain came from, then it is completely likely that it is your autonomic nervous system, which is simply out of balance. Yeah.
Okay, a quick side note. Actually, two quick side notes. One is that, as I predicted, the point I made went down like the Hindenburg right away. You corrected that for me very well. Thank you for that. And secondly...
In flames?
In flames.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Oh, the humanity. And then a second ago, you also moved your microphone over a little bit.
Isn't it better?
And we can hear your voice much better now.
I know.
Well done. Now that's paramount. That's good. That's what we want. So keep it right there. The thing is that the boom attached to that microphone is now partially obscuring one of your eyes. So it's like speaking this morning to Rooster Cogburn, and I suspect it's going to be that way for the rest of the morning.
And perhaps any other time we utilize these microphones.
That's fine.
Because it actually sounds better to me, too. And I have more access to my information.
That's great.
And I don't have to look at you out of one eye.
Everybody wins with this deal. There we go. So the autonomic nervous system, more importantly, how does that relate to chronic pain?
So the autonomic nervous system, and I don't mind explaining this, every other show if I have to. This is really important, folks. You got to get this. If you have any symptom that comes and goes or comes and stays, any symptom, it means that you're not regulating. I use this term all the time. Regulation, you think of regulating anything is essentially balancing, a process. Visualize a street crossing. intersection.
Okay, I've got that in my mind.
There's always some kind of signal or some kind of, regulator, a traffic officer, or signs or streetlights or something that are essentially regulating that intersection so that there is an orderly movement of traffic, both foot traffic and automobile traffic through that intersection. Do you follow?
I do.
So imagine that intersection without any regulating mechanisms.
Well, then you would have downtown Portland. That's what you would have down there.
You'd have chaos.
You would.
You'd have sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that is lack of regulation, and that applies to the body as well. So when you're not regulating is when you're experiencing some kind of symptom, and that can be something as mild as a runny nose to as major as intractable pain. And everything in between. You think about a symptom you've ever experienced, and regulation is bound to have some, implication in there some way, somehow.
So is pain cause or symptom? Is the fact that you're experiencing pain your body telling you that there's a more serious problem, or is the pain itself the problem?
There's a more serious problem going on. There's something in regulation that's not. Now, remember, folks, we are not talking about an obvious broken bone or a trauma. We're talking about the chronic nature of pain, the pain that comes on for reasons you don't understand, and or remains from a trauma, and that's not understood. Then the autonomic nervous system has something to do with that. So yes, pain is an indicator that something deeper is going on. Some regulating factor or regulated process is not being handled well, sorted well.
When you say the pain from a trauma, are you saying like an accident, some way you break a bone or something like that? And let's say the bone heals, but you're still having some sort of extra pain as you go on.
Perfect example is someone in an automobile accident who has, and that injury, at least the physical injury itself, appears to be long healed, and yet there's still chronic pain.
And we may just take that as a matter of course. Say if we've been in an auto accident, you may for years go on saying, well, my shoulder hurts.
Exactly. And you'll say, and I'll hear this in the clinic all the time, well, I had this break here, or my if it's back pain or vertebral pain, there's the spaces between my vertebrae are narrowed, or they're too small. Or now in some cases, there's absolutely some structural impingement. There's no doubt about that. But my experience in my clinic is that more times than not, the structure is not the issue.
I think there's a tendency, however, to accept that. Again, using the auto accident as an example, if you've hurt some part of your body in that accident, many will just take that chronic pain as a matter of course. They'll figure, well, there's nothing I can do about that.
And the practitioners essentially promote that. I mean, that's their point of view, because most practitioners simply don't understand the way in which the autonomic nervous system functions within the body energetically and its relationship to symptoms. Now, I'm not saying I'm, necessarily the smartest, sharpest tool in the shed. I'm just saying that after 26 years of clinical experience, utilizing my understanding of the autonomic nervous system and regulation, I have been able to help people resolve chronic pain that they have experienced for years, decades.
Chronic pain, however, is not always necessarily the result of trauma. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, the most common chronic pain that people experience throughout probably throughout the world, but certainly throughout the United States, are things like chronic low back pain and chronic neck pain.
Many people could try lifting something that's too heavy for them, or they can lift improperly, not using their legs to lift as they should, and they hurt themselves, and they figure, well, that's the problem right there.
Exactly. And in some cases, that's totally true. In some cases, they have done structural damage when they've done that. But in most cases, at least the cases that I see in my clinic, the area of injury is predisposed because of these reasons. And I'm going to talk about these as we go along throughout this morning. But the area is predisposed, and when something happens, it creates the tipping point experience. You know what tipping point means.
I think that's a self-defining term.
Yeah, just an event that pushes, a process over the edge, and you experience the result of that.
So as we get older or more brittle or whatever, I would think we are more susceptible to chronic pain.
Not necessarily. But if you're not paying attention to regulation, if you're not paying attention to the autonomic nervous system and how it is or is not balanced, then you set the stage for all kinds of predispositions. I had a patient, just this past week, who has a history of chronic low back pain. And we have helped him immensely, first of all, almost eliminate it completely. But when he gets a little loosey-goosey with his diet, or he is impinged by an environmental factor, we've talked about those many times, things like chemicals and accumulated metals and immune challenges, like the body being affected by a virus or a bacteria or a parasite or a fungal issue, that can interfere with the body's regulation, and thus, depending on which organ or gland is the affected site, will create a musculoskeletal predisposition for dysfunction. Does that make sense?
It does, and that was the question I was going to ask, actually. In the case of that patient, using him as an example, was his chronic lower back pain due to a trauma, or was it more what you're describing, where he had bad habits which just created conditions for his back to ache?
Yeah, in this particular situation, it turned out to be chemicals. And right now, during this particular period of time, generally, April through the end of September, first couple of weeks of October, chemicals in the environment are prevalent, and they are affecting our autonomic nervous systems. I mean, we're not like just flopping over dead because of it, but it creates a lot of disturbance in our body's ability to manage itself, and thus result in symptoms. So he works at a job also where there are a lot of chemicals.
So to be more specific, during these months, you're talking about pesticides and other
herbicides
factors.
And fungicides and pollutants from vehicles and industry. Yeah.
And you say his work environment may contribute to that. Is he in a factory or some environment like that, or on a farm, or maybe even in an office where they haven't quite cleaned out the asbestos just yet?
Works in the garden section of a store.
So basically, he would be exposed to any number of chemicals.
Absolutely. And so he has a history of chronic back pain. So first and foremost, we tracked it down found the environmental impingement, identified that with specificity, and it always affects this particular gland.
Now, you said with a specific target here, what exactly was he exposed to that was helping cause this condition?
Pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and fertilizers.
Okay, well, that's obvious where he was.
Yeah.
So once you diagnosed that, were there other contributing factors?
Of course, we don't diagnose. That's really important. But once we observed it.
Once you figured that out.
Yeah, once we... No diagnoses. That's a technical term.
Okay, we'll set that one aside.
Yeah, we have to set that one aside.
Okay.
But once we were able to sort it, then we found out which organ or gland was affected. And when it comes to low back pain, folks, If you have chronic low back pain, then you have chronic adrenal problems. Or kidney, adrenal or kidney.
So here we arrive at a very counterintuitive moment.
Indeed.
If I'm having lower back pain, the last thing I'm thinking is chronic lower back pain. The last thing I'm thinking is adrenal glands.
Right. That's exactly right. It's the last thing we think about. In fact, it's the last thing we think that any internal organ or gland would have anything to do with this, because this appears to be a musculoskeletal condition. But it's totally true. By addressing this patient's adrenal gland, and it happened to just be one, and it was on the side of where he was experiencing the pain, which is totally common. I gave him specifically the product that he needed to address the environmental impingement, the chemicals, and voila! Within a matter of an hour or two, pain is gone.
Well,
100%.
What was the product he needed? Was it a plastic bag over his head, or what?
Oh my gosh.
To stay.
No,
by the way, folks, don't put a plastic bag on your head.
We want to be much more compassionate than that, Rod. We really do.
But you said you had a specific thing that would help him avoid those.
For him in particular, which is why I don't promote products in general, folks. I just don't. Anybody that's promoting products in general is just basically, generally speaking, selling you a pig in a poke. Because every product, if you want the effects that the product is promoting that it addresses, then you have to muscle test it against your own body's needs. This muscle testing thing, as crazy as it sounds, as crazy it is, you can go to my website at acunatural.com and take a look at what it looks like. There's a video, on my website. But even though this muscle testing looks woo-woo or crazy, the bottom line is that it enables us to get a gauge on a person's autonomic nervous system. Oh, gee, how important is that from what I've been describing? Rod?
I would say somewhat important.
Yes, somewhat important. And then find out what it needs, and voila. So most people who go out and buy products for conditions are it's a crapshoot. You may or may not get the results from that product. There are many, many very effective alternative approaches, not the least of which is, in my view, finding your personal nutritional deficiencies and barriers to healing and addressing regulation. We were talking about that at the last segment. And when you do that, miraculous relief occurs.
You spoke of a patient who was able to address his chronic lower back pain by addressing problems with his adrenal glands, and that was done through diet. What about those suffering from arthritis or bursitis or other seemingly chronic joint pain? Is there any hope there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are situations where things have gone too far, where the joint pain, where the joints themselves have actually been structurally, changed. You've seen sort of like lumpy, sort of swollen. You just recognize it right away.
Sure,
right?
there are those in my social circle who have those things going on, and they also sometimes just have trouble holding a pen or holding a television remote, which may not be that bad, actually. Finally, a cure for couch potatoism. You can't hold onto the remote. But you don't want that chronic pain, right?
Yeah, but some of those conditions will not restore a joint to normal presence. It just won't. That change, for the most part, from what I can see, is forever, right? Until you let this body down. But the pain itself, way before that, is absolutely addressable. We do it in my clinic every day. And again, there is some nutritional deficiency and or environmental impingement. Oftentimes, it's chemicals and ongoing immune challenges that are affecting the liver. By the way, the liver is key here when it comes both to joint pain and fibromyalgia.
And again, I know you can't generalize for everybody. But what typically are some of the things that are wrong? You mentioned the liver, for example. What's wrong that can be addressed through diet when somebody is suffering from, say, arthritis or bursitis?
Well, if you eat the wrong foods over time, you deprive your body, including the organs and glands in that body, of the necessary material to both maintain function or even sort of affect the healing process, undermine the healing process. If you don't have the material, what material? Vitamins, minerals, proteins, et cetera, et cetera.
And that would happen for most of us, that would happen over a long period of time, that we're depriving ourselves of those essential nutrients, and therefore we have these ill effects, maybe including arthritis or bursitis.
Well, that's certainly a part of it. That's certainly a part of it. Then the liver is doing its daily job, and slowly but surely it's undermined and becomes incapable of doing its daily job. But there's almost always an environmental factor there. Almost always.
So to ask the obvious question then, if we're drinking a lot, if we're a problem drinker, and I'm saying we because I don't want to, single anybody out. If you drink too much and you harm your liver, you could also create these other conditions for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, that's the reverse is not true. Everybody who drinks is not going to end up with arthritis or fibromyalgia. But that's where genetics come in. That's where the predisposition genes get triggered, and for those folks who are predisposed, they will experience those types of symptoms, and those who are not will experience some other types of symptoms. So it's important to understand that, just because you drank alcohol doesn't necessarily mean you're destined to experience arthritis or fibromyalgia. But yes, if you have got fibromyalgia, if you are experiencing arthritis, then the health of the liver is in question, and usually along the way the health of the thyroid is in question as well. They kind of bounce off each other. They work together. They're connected. So that's important to understand. And the other important thing to understand is many of you who are experiencing this will say to yourself, well, I've been tested. My liver's been tested, done blood tests, and there doesn't seem to be any obvious abnormal readings there. I've done thyroid tests. There's no abnormalcy whatsoever. I am telling you, if you're experiencing those symptoms, just like water is wet, and there's no way that you can run out in the rain without getting wet, that there is something going on with your liver and thyroid.
Other physical manifestations of a drinking problem, and I'm not trying to be a wise guy here.
You and your alcohol.
Sometimes people get that great big red bulbous W.C. Fields nose, it seems, the drinker's nose. I'm sure there's a name for it.
Yeah. I think you got it.
What are you talking about?
Drinker's nose.
I do not. I have a...
No.
I'm turning to you right now so you can see my profile.
I think you've accurately described it.
I have a great big potato nose, but it is not. Rod, it is not a drinker's nose.
Rod, you're being overly sensitive. You completely misunderstood my remark. You said you weren't sure what they called it, and I said drinker's nose. Well, but exactly what it is.
I'm just pointing out that you could take my nose and make a big bushel of fries if you wanted to. But it's a potato nose.
I don't think anybody wants to eat your nose. Nobody wants to eat your nose.
Nobody's been stuck on a desert island with me,
there are much.
No, don't even go there.
Much more prime parts than your nose.
Well, the nose goes first. If it comes to that,
how did we get here?
I don't know. The nose is going to be my first offer.
Anyway, so those folks who are experiencing chronic joint pain or fibromyalgia, you absolutely have to have someone like myself do some muscle testing and find out what the energetic state of that organ and that gland is, and then begin to address it. And that's why so many people that I work with who have had chronic pain for so long actually resolve it and, as a result, are much happier people.
And to go back to the beginning of our conversation, what about those who do suffer some kind of trauma, say from a car accident or something like that, and they do have pain which has done some kind of permanent damage to their bodies? Is the best they can do at some point just alleviate the pain? Or are we doomed forever to have...
Well, first of all, that category of people is very small. It's very small. But the category of people with chronic pain of unknown origin is very large. So that's the one thing. But to answer your question, there's probably always something we can do on the nutritional level. Whether or not it alleviates all of the pain is another issue. But in my experience in the clinic is never say never, because I've just seen so many cool things happen for people when they take control, when they change their diet accordingly, and when they address the nutritional deficiencies and barriers to healing. It's really amazing. And we're going to hear from somebody when we come back. We'll
hear from your patient, Dave. Also, Frontier Pete is on the agenda today.
Well, you said that last week, and what happened?
We didn't hear from him. But here's something, too. The beer and liquor industry recently spent $60 million to fund a study on moderate drinking, sponsored by the National Institutes of Health. Companies sometimes have an impact where they shouldn't. More on that next on Health Matters.
This is Paul Rosen, and you're listening to Health Matters broadcast every Sunday from 8 to 10 a.m. and rebroadcast the following Saturday from 6 to 8 a.m. And if you like what you hear on this show, my podcast, Health Matters with Paul Rosen, is now live. Go to my website, AcuNatural, that's acunatural.com. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
That was great. that was the tone of C, brought to you by Paul Rosen.
There you go. People who are actually utilizing medications to handle this pain, the risks are enormous, and in many times irreversible, and sometimes lethal when you're using medications to address chronic pain. So there are many very effective alternative approaches, not the least of which is, in my view, finding your personal nutritional deficiencies and barriers to healing and addressing regulation. We were talking about that at the last segment. And when you do that, miraculous relief occurs.
You spoke of a patient who was able to address his chronic lower back pain by addressing problems with his adrenal glands, and that was done through diet. What about those suffering from arthritis or bursitis or other seemingly chronic joint pain? Is there any hope there?
Absolutely. I mean, there are situations where things have gone too far, where the joint pain, where the joints themselves have actually been structurally, changed. You've seen sort of like lumpy, sort of swollen. You just recognize it right away.
Sure,
right?
there are those in my social circle who have those things going on, and they also sometimes just have trouble holding a pen or holding a television remote, which may not be that bad, actually. Finally, a cure for couch potatoism. You can't hold onto the remote, but you don't want that chronic pain, right?
Yeah, but some of those conditions will not restore a joint to normal presence. It just won't. That change, for the most part, from what I can see, is forever, right? Until you let this body down. But the pain itself, way before that, is absolutely addressable. We do it in my clinic every day. And again, there is some nutritional deficiency and or environmental impingement. Oftentimes, it's chemicals and ongoing immune challenges that are affecting the liver. By the way, the liver is key here when it comes both to joint pain and fibromyalgia.
And again, I know you can't generalize for everybody, but what typically are some of the things that are wrong? You mentioned the liver, for example. What's wrong that can be addressed through diet when somebody is suffering from, say, arthritis or bursitis?
Well, if you eat the wrong foods over time, you deprive your body, including the organs and glands in that body, of the necessary material to both maintain function or even sort of affect the healing process, undermine the healing process. if you don't have the material. What material? Vitamins, minerals, proteins, etc., etc.
One more note, you can get a free chapter of Paul Rosen's book, The Missing Piece. Just go to his website, acunatural.com, acunatural.com, and fill out the dialog box that pops up. Rest assured, no information you provide will ever be shared with anyone else. So, what are you waiting for? Get going on your personal road to wellness today.